Hey everyone, it's Carissa Wiley at sprinkledwithglitter.com. Welcome to my craft room today. Today I am filming a real-time crafting video and I'm creating with the new triple step happy day bundle from Concord 9th. This was just released today and it's available now. I will have links in the YouTube description below, but I thought it would be fun to show you how to create an adorable mini card using this triple step stamping stamp set. Now, for those of you who are a little newer to stamping, you may not be familiar with a double or triple step stamping system, and so I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to show you how to use the set. So let's get to it. So here is a look at the bundle that I'm using today. You can see it's a nice large stamp set that has 3 large one-piece stamps that you're going to combine together to create this adorable Oh Happy Day greeting. And of course, we'll be using the coordinating die set as well to create a scalloped mini card. And so what I'm going to do is start off by bringing in my MISTI stamping tool. And I'm going to set up my MISTI stamping tool with the first stamp from the stamp set. Now here's something that I would suggest. I like to stamp on a sheet that's a little bit larger, but I'm using a half sheet today. But the reason I like to do this is once I have kind of stamped on one side, I can then rotate this paper while I have my stamp still set up, and I can kind of stamp 2 of these cards at once. So I'm going to start out with this large one-piece stamp up here in that upper left-hand corner. I'll remove that from the backer. And I'm going to kind of just center it up on the left side of my cardstock here. Now I'm using Concord 9th white cardstock. And something I like to do when I'm kind of setting this up is I like to use the grid lines of my MISTI to make sure that kind of the bottoms of the letters are in the same position. So this little arch of the rainbow and the A, those look like they're pretty straight across. So once I get that kind of settled in the place that I want it, I can use the lid of my MISTI to pick that up. Now, every time I go to stamp this, I want to make sure that that cardstock is in that lower left-hand corner. So if it picks up with my lid, when I pick up the stamp, I'm going to go ahead and just tuck it back into that left-hand corner, and then I can go ahead and ink up my stamp and stamp it in place. Now, I'm starting out with Tidepool ink, and I'm inking up my stamp, and then I will close the lid of my MISTI. And if this is not a solid stamping, because these are pretty solid stamps, but if it's not as smooth as I want it to be, then I can go ahead and restamp this again. Now keep in mind, this ink is going to dry back and it's going to smooth out as it dries. But if you're not liking the look, because you are using a stamp positioning tool, it's easy just to re-ink and then stamp again. So that's what I'm going to do here. And remember how I said once you get this positioned, you can go ahead and stamp a couple of these. I'm going to do that. So I'm going to pick up my cardstock and I'm going to rotate it, tuck it in that lower left-hand corner. And if I wanted to do a different color scheme at this point, I could, but I'm going to ink it up with Tidepool ink and then stamp it onto the other side of this cardstock. That's going to give me 2 pieces to choose from when I finish off my cards today. This Tidepool ink pad that I have is super juicy right now. So it is stamping, you kind of get some of those lines in there sometime, but I find that stamping twice takes care of it. So then I can go ahead and wipe down my stamp and place it back onto the backer and then place my second stamp. So this is the first stamp that I use. Then I'm going to move down to this one. And I like to go in this order because I'm building the arches of my rainbow from the inside out. And I find that just helps me kind of position everything. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this one-piece stamp from the backer. And again, just position this. I'm going to look down through the stamp, making sure that this cardstock is in that lower left-hand corner. I'm going to look down through the stamp and just kind of make sure that, again, the bottoms of my arches are kind of in line with each other. The bottom of my letters are in line with each other. And this little flower up here, I just want to make sure that that's kind of centered up with the center that I've already stamped. And then I can use the grid lines of my MISTI again to make sure I'm pretty close, and I am. So I'm going to go ahead and pick that up with the lid of my MISTI. So now that I have that picked up, I can go ahead and ink up my stamp and stamp both of these. And I'll just speed through this process so that you can see this in action. Okay, so I've stamped stamp number 1, which was my first step. I've stamped stamp number 2, which was my second step. And now I'm going to move on to step number 3, which is my third or my triple step stamping. Now this is kind of a funky shaped stamp. So what I like to do is I like to just lay it on to my cardstock and allow it to kind of regain its natural shape. I'm going to make sure again that the bottoms of my letters are kind of all lined up. The bottoms of my arches seem to be pretty even, and that my florals over here, the stems and the floral pieces are kind of all in line. And then again, I'm just going to use the grid line of my MISTI and make sure it's kind of hitting that all at the same place. And once I have that positioned where I want it, I'm going to pick up my stamp, open that lid of my MISTI again, and this time I'm stamping in honeycomb ink. So this is a really nice yellow. It's nice and bright, and it's going to really complete this color scheme nicely. And then just again, I'm just verifying that it's in that lower left-hand corner before I stamp to make sure that everything's lined up properly. So I think that actually looks really good without double stamping. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate my cardstock again. I'll ink up one more time, and then stamp it onto my second card project. And you can see how creating a couple of these at one time really saves you a lot of time because you're already positioning the stamps. And so you might as well just create a couple of cards all at once, right? So now I have my perfectly stamped little elements here that I can trim down and use for 2 separate cards. I'm just gonna do a little cleanup and I'll be right back with you. So in addition to the sentiment that you get from the triple step stamping, there are also some detail layers which you can add to your card, and I'm going to do that. There's a few of these letters that have kind of these fun patterns that you can stamp directly on top of them. This is the H here, and it has like this little cross stitch pattern. You could either do this in a tone on tone, or you can do it in the gray like I'm doing, and I actually just prefer to stamp these with a block. And the reason is that I don't care if they're just slightly off. I think that adds to the charm of the finished look. So I'm just kind of looking down through the stamp and making sure that I'm stamping that where I want it. And then I'm going to move on to the Y, which has some stripes on it, and that's right here. Again, I'm just going to grab it with my block and stamp it right over the top of that Y. And maybe on this one, I'll stamp it on this Y. Okay. So you can kind of do this in a couple of different ways. And then I'm going to grab the pattern for the D here, and I'm going to stamp that onto this lower portion there. And then for the middle row, I think I'll take the detail layer for the A on this side and stamp that there. Now, if you wanted a little lighter look, you could go with Pebble instead of Cobblestone, but I wanted this to stand out. So I have that. And then finally, I'm going to take and just stamp the little detail portion on the rainbow arch. So this little piece here, which fits the middle layer of that rainbow or that bow pattern here. So you can see how that'll fit nicely on there. So just gonna stamp that right over the top. Again, just using a block here because I find that that's kind of the quickest way to do this. So now that I have 2 of these created, I'm going to go ahead and die cut one using the scallop pattern from the coordinating die set. I'm just going to kind of get it lined up to where it looks like it's centered. I can hold it in place with some removable tape, or I can just use the magnetic sheet of my Anna Griffin Empress to kind of hold that in place. One thing I do like to do is kind of just look at where these points are kind of intersecting with this scallop pattern at the bottom to make sure that I have everything kind of lined up straight. And once I'm comfortable with that, I'm going to go ahead and die cut that layer there for my card. So you can see I have this adorable little layer for my card, and then I have a second card project that I can create something different with later on. For now, I'm going to take this same scallop piece and I'm going to die cut 2 more additional layers of a heavyweight cardstock to create my card base. I'm also going to grab some of the elements from the die set, these smaller elements, and die cut them out of various colors of cardstock. So I'm going to do some yellow or some honeycomb for this scallop piece. And I will grab some sorbet cardstock and die cut the top of my floral and then 3 little hearts here. We'll run those all through at the same time. I'm also going to grab some champagne cardstock and die cut this Scripty Happy. This is such a fun little die cut that you can use for a variety of cards. I'm just going to kind of bend up my magnetic mat to kind of pull it off. And I'll set that aside. And I'm also going to die cut it a couple of times from some plain white cardstock so that I can layer it up and give it some dimension and bulk on the front of my finished card. So I'll just run that through a couple of times. Okay, so now I have my stamped piece. I have 2 additional heavyweight white cardstock pieces. I'm going to create my card base. So in order to do this, I'm just going to take one of these scalloped pieces that I've cut for my card back. I'm going to place it into my scoring tool and I'm going to line it up kind of where the score line is going to hit right between these 2 scallops. And then I will just score right across that a few times. And I can just kind of fold along that line and reinforce that. And that's going to be the back of my card. And in order to adhere this together, I am going to use some strong double-sided adhesive and I'll just place it right above the score line. So making sure that this doesn't go below the score line, I'm just staying above that score line there and placing this. And I love a tape like this because you can just tear it, you don't have to cut it. Then I can remove the backer from this adhesive and I'll line these 2 heavyweight layers up just like this using the top of or the work surface of my desk, and I'll press that together and that gives me my little shaped card base. Then I'm going to take and I'm going to just adhere this stamped portion, and the reason I didn't do it directly onto the card front is because I wanted to give it a little bit more sturdiness. So I'm just going to use some tape runner adhesive for that. I'll line it up here just by using the top of my work surface and then place that down. And now I have this on my card front. Isn't that adorable? I love this kind of little mini card. Now I'm just going to take some foam adhesive and I'm just going to add it to the back of some of these die cuts that I've created. I'll use my scissors to just trim down extra pieces. And then once I have that on there, I can remove the backer Place that right over the stamped version just to give it a little bit of kind of dimension there. And I love that this die set kind of gives you these options. You can see I'm using these where I've die cut them out of plain cardstock, but I could also stamp this layer and put it in place as well, which I think would be a fun look. This is also a great opportunity to bring in kind of some extra color where I didn't get it on my stamping. So instead of a 3-color palette, now I'm bringing in the Sorbet, and it gives me like a 4-color palette instead. So I'm just going to place this little heart in the center of the O there. And then I'll save these little hearts, and I'll go ahead and just stack these up. So I'm going to place some liquid glue right on top of these white die cut layers. And I'm going to top them off and stack them up using that champagne piece. So I'm just adding some quick glue. This is the Barely Art glue. I use that quite a bit. And once I have glue on that first layer, I'll pick up the second layer, stack it on top, and then use my fingers to kind of just make sure everything's in place. Press that down, and then I'll add the champagne layer on top. So just again, adding some liquid glue. And then I'll add the champagne layer on top, and then I can adhere this right over that happy word on my card front. Just making sure that that all lines up. I'll press it down, and then I'm going to add some liquid glue along the back of this. Now, when I'm adding liquid glue to pieces like this, I like to make sure that I hit kind of the high and the low points, so the tops and the bottoms of things, and then just kind of get in the center as well. I mean, I don't have to cover the whole thing, but if you hit the highs with like a little dot of glue, and then the little ends that stick out, and then the bottom parts, that kind of gets you covered pretty well. And then I'm going to take this, and I'm going to line it up on my card front, kind of right over that previously stamped happy greeting. And I'll go right about there with it and press that down. Okay. So now we have that kind of doubled up happy greeting, which I think is so much fun. So now that I have that happy in place, I'm going to go ahead and grab another one of the small hearts. I'm going to use some foam adhesive on the back side of that. And I'll just place it kind of right here-ish on my card, kind of bringing that sorbet down. And then I'm going to grab this birthday greeting from the stamp set, and I'm going to heat emboss that on some vellum. So put that foam adhesive along the back there, and then I'll grab the birthday, and we can stamp our birthday greeting and heat emboss that on vellum. So I have my little scrap of vellum here, and because it is vellum and it likes to hold on to things that we don't love, I'm gonna treat it with some anti-static powder tool before I heat emboss. And I am using some VersaMark ink. This is the ink that I use most when I'm embossing. And I just re-inked it, and it's working so much better. And I'll just stamp that onto the vellum, just using a block here. And for this, I am going to use some platinum embossing powder from Altenew. I find that this matches that champagne color really nicely. I'll just sprinkle on the embossing powder, tap off the excess, and then I can funnel all this back into my jar. Most of the time I spill, that's okay. And then I will heat set that. My heat tool literally just died, and I've had one in my stash like a backup for a while because I thought that same one had died earlier. So thank goodness. Just gonna let this heat up. You can see that's a beautiful heat embossing there. Good job, new gun. And to die cut this greeting, I have found that the new sweet stems, the little banners in here, are perfect for this. So I'm just gonna grab the little banner from this new sweet stems, which I will have some more inspiration on my channel featuring that soon. We'll line that up and I will just die cut that. And I'm just going to add some liquid glue to the back side of this heart and just kind of allow it to overlap the left side of this little banner here. Kind of glue that in place. Just like that. Then I'm going to take this and adhere it right over the top of that day word. Right about there. And place that on to my card front, just like that. That platinum embossing powder is like the perfect match for that champagne cardstock from Concord 9th. So to finish this card off, I just added a little bit of twine there along that card base. I think it's such a fun little addition to this adorable mini birthday card featuring the new triple step Happy Day bundle from Concord 9th. It's available now. As always, I will have links in the YouTube description below, so if you're looking for something in particular, be sure you check there. Thanks for stopping by today. I hope you enjoyed this project, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notifications here so you don't miss any of my paper crafting, card making, and live stream video tutorials. I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for joining me, and until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day.